Welcome. In this video I'm going to be taking a look at this ZahyoX 1/4 inch solid carbide spiral downcut bit. So this was provided to me by the distributor, but they're not compensating me for this video and they're not reviewing it before I post it. If you find this video helpful and you want to purchase one of these, I'll put a link to it in the description on Amazon, and if you use that link it helps me out a little bit and doesn't cost anything extra. Okay, so let's get this open. Okay, so here we have the bit. So let me get this out of the package so we can take a look. So this has a nano coating on it to increase wear life and reduce friction. This is a spiral downcut bit. So if it's in the router like this and spinning like this, it presses the fibers into the wood. So this helps reduce tear out. It has 2 flutes on it, one on either side. And this is solid carbide, so it's going to be very hard. As such, it could also be brittle, so you want to make sure you don't drop it or bang it up against other hard materials. So a bit like this would be good for cutting grooves in wood where you don't want tear out on the top. So I just wanted to show this on my bench here, close up. Let's head to my shop and we'll test this out. Okay, so I'm here in my shop. I have my router and I have a 1/4 inch collet in it. So I'll take the bit and we'll install it in the router. So when I place this in here, I want to make sure I don't put it all the way down. Probably want it in at least 3/4 of an inch. I'll try it right about there. I'll tighten it up. Now I'm going to install this in my router table. Okay, so I have the router bit mounted in the table here. So I'm going to be creating a box like you'd use for a drawer. This is a tongue and dado joint. So the pieces will be oriented like so. So I want to put a dado on each of these pieces. So I'm going to sketch that out. So I'm going to make a mark. And then I'll have a tongue here. So I think it will be easiest to route the dados first. So I'll move these out of the way. So we want to cut a groove around here, and we want the edge of the groove to be at the edge of this board. So I'll hold that up there. And I'll draw this on here. And I'm just doing this for demonstration. You actually don't need to draw this on here. So we have a line here, and the router bit will cut, something like this. In order to cut that, we'll use a fence. So I'm just going to take a board and clamp it on here. This is a homemade router table. If you have a professional router table, you could use the fence that came with it. So I want to get this pretty close, and I want this edge of the router bit to be lined up with this edge of the board, like that. So I'll get it close, and I'm going to clamp one end. So I have this clamped down, and I can pivot this end to really dial in the adjustment. So I'm going to butt a board up against the router bit. I'll set this on top of it, and then I will angle the board until it's butted up. So I think that's pretty good alignment. Next we need to set the height. Now this is 9mm Baltic birch plywood, and this plywood has plies that are 1mm thick, so I don't even have to measure with this. Other wood you might need to measure, so I want to go halfway. So I'll just count 4.5 layers here, and I'll adjust the height to be that high out of the router table. So I'm going to butt the board up here and bring the bit up or down till it lines up with the middle of that layer. Now this doesn't have to be absolutely perfect because the tongues will be cut to match. Okay, I think I have that lined up pretty nice. I need to push this through in this orientation to cut this, and that's very, very unstable. So I have a backer board here I can put behind it, and I can push these through together, and it'll give me a more stable cut. So I want to make sure everything's tight here. Now there are 2 different directions we could push this through. We could push it left to right or right to left. I have an arrow on here showing the direction of the rotation of the bit. So you want to push the wood into the bit. So this bit is spinning this way, so this wood will be pushed into the fence. If I do it from this direction, it will be trying to kick it out from the fence. So this will be a more stable cut. You still want to have a good grip on this, so I'm going to use a gripper here to help steady this. So I think I'm ready to make these cuts. Okay, so here are the cuts. You can see they're very clean here. So that router bit is pressing into the wood, so it's preventing tear out on that edge. Now there's a little bit of tear out here. I can just knock that off. If you wanted to prevent tear out here, you could leave this long and then cut it down later, but this isn't bad here. So next we want to cut the tongues. So those are going to go in there. So we want the height of the bit to be the same as the width of this dado, and then we want the distance of the bit to the fence to be the depth of the dado. So if I look at this, this is about 5 plies high, So I'll go ahead and set this to 5 plies high. I am going to unplug it, of course, and I did have it unplugged earlier when I wasn't actually cutting. Next, I need to set the fence. So there's a good chance I'm going to have to cut into my fence a little bit. So I'll loosen it up while it's running and pull it into the fence very carefully. I'll turn it off, unplug it, measure it, and then adjust it. Okay, so I've completed the cuts. Now what you saw me doing there was taking a scrap piece of wood and making some test cuts, seeing how they fit. So I had to lower the bit a little bit and I had to push the fence in. And that allowed me to get it dialed into where I wanted it. Now maybe I could do a little bit better, we'll see. But this slides in here now. We break off this little bit. And this should slide in here. But there we go. So if you wanted to make this into a drawer or a box, you could then route a groove on the bottom here and then cut a piece of 1/4-inch plywood or wood to fit in there. You could glue right to the bottom of this and use a flush trim bit to cut it perfectly. So that would be more like a utilitarian drawer. The other one would be a little fancier. Now if you had a lot of drawers to do like this, what I would do is use a table saw with a jig to cut a lot of this material out and maybe cut some of this out and then do the final cut on the router. So the table saw would remove a bulk of the material very quickly and then the router would clean it up because this router bit's going to have those smooth edges and that flat bottom. So if you cut it with a table saw, you could just maybe do one cut right down the middle of this or maybe two just slightly overlapping because you don't want to use the table saw to cut the edges. You want the spiral router bit to do it. But if you only have a few, you could cut it all with the router bit. That would be if you're making a whole kitchen's worth. So that's the ZahyoX 1/4-inch spiral upcut bit. I really like the performance of this bit. It cut easily. If you're having a chatter or anything when you cut, make sure you have your wood pressed down tight and tight up against the fence, and then you'll get a smooth cut. A cut like this is really good for when you have those edges that are going to be exposed, like in a drawer. You can see these edges here, so you don't want any tear out on them. So a bit like this would be good for doing drawer boxes, or if you had a drawer like this, you could cut grooves in the side and make little dividers that you could slide in and out. And you can make small rabbits and dados with a bit like this also. It has that coating on it to keep it cool and clean, and I don't see any buildup on the bit. Although if you're into a sappier wood, you'll want to check it more often and make sure you do clean it if it does get dirty. But that should be minimized by the coating. So that's all I'm going to cover in this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. If you like this video, please click like. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I'd appreciate if you could do that. And thanks for watching. Until next time, goodbye.